All gave some gave all. Some would march on, others would fall. There are no winners in war when you consider the cost. You cannot justify the thousands of lives for our own that were lost. Wars leave scars that in time may fade, but not without taking a toll. However, the deepest wounds are those that scar the very heart and soul. For those that saw action during wartime, I'm sure without a doubt, they've had to live with the memories of fallen comrades, their brothers, someone they cared deeply about. And all the families left behind with only their memories to carry them through, also paying the price of freedom won for me and you. We are all aware that times have changed, and yet there are certain things we must never forget. Be proud of our flag, and long may she wave, and long may we remember what so many gave.
I'm Shane Weissler. I was living in Crofton, Nebraska when I enlisted into the South Dakota Army National Guard in 1998 at the age of 17. I was in the service for 22 years. Most of my time was served in South Dakota. I did 3 tours overseas during the Iraq campaign. I now live in Crofton. I picked a branch of service of the National Guard because I wanted to stay around the area and continue to help out on the family farm and work and not have to be away from family most of the time. I joined the service because my grandfathers both were in the service, and also me and some classmates decided that we wanted to get out of school, so we'd go talk to a recruiter, and we all decided to join. While in the service, my assignment was a MLRS crew member, which is a multiple launch rocket systems. I started off as a driver, then moved to a gunner, then became a chief, and I did that for probably 6-7 years. Did many assignments around going to annual training up in Minnesota, went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, went to Guernsey, Wyoming. My first few days when I went overseas, I remember walking off the plane. It was nice and cool on the plane, and as soon as we got off, it was like walking into an oven. It was scorching hot. I think when we arrived in Baghdad International Airport, they said the temperature at the time was about 112 degrees, which we were not used to whatsoever. And while I was over in Iraq during the 2005-2006 time frame, the worst day I had was December 4th, 2005. My platoon was supposed to go on a mission, and as we were getting ready, we were doing radio communications, making sure everything worked, and came across the radio that a platoon of ours had just been hit by roadside bombs. We sat there and listened to the radio communications the whole time, and I ended up losing my platoon sergeant, Rich Shield at the time, and had several other buddies that were injured and ended up succumbing to their injuries. Corey Breest, who was a friend of mine, is still alive yet to this day, but has a lot of complications from that day. I did make quite a few friends that I stay in touch with. I have one buddy that I met when I was over in Kuwait in 2009 and 10. He was in the Coast Guard, and we were doing missions with those guys, and I was sent down to the Coast Guard Navy area by myself. I was the only Army guy down there, didn't know anybody. So I decided to sit outside the guard shack and started looking at a hunting magazine to kill some time, and this guy came out and started talking to me and asked if I like deer hunting. I said, yeah. So we started talking, and he goes, well, where do you live? And so I told him I lived in Nebraska, and well, you got big deer back there? And I'm like, oh yeah, we got some big deer. And so we sat there and talked the rest of the day, and we made a agreement that he would take me shark fishing in New York if I let him come out here and deer hunt. And so ever since then, he's been coming out here, seeing me every year. We go deer hunting together and enjoy the time that we have. And I've kept in touch with him ever since that day, and we still talk to this day. I actually just talked to him yesterday. Would I recommend youth today to join the service? Yes. When I was in high school, I was just a kid that did whatever I wanted and pretty much whenever I wanted. And after joining the military, I learned respect for my elders and respect for everybody. When I was going through boot camp, the drill sergeants were pretty hard on us and told us pretty much how to act like young, responsible adults. And ever since then, that's how I lived by.
I'm Walter Goobel Jr. I was living in Shoals, Nebraska while I enlisted and into the branch of the service of the United States Air Force at the age of 19. I was in the service for 4 years, so most of my time served in the locations, in most of the locations in El Paso, Texas. I was stationed, and I now live in Randolph, Nebraska. The biggest deal that I did for the military was I refueled airplanes, jet fighters off of Midway Island. It was the first time they ever flew across the ocean. They was hit by 3 or 4 more squadrons, different places. And refueling the airplanes in the air was quite a deal, because that was just the beginning of refueling airplanes in the air. Before doing it with with a stick, to refuel them in the air, they used to drop a hose down and they would catch it. And then from then on, we would sit in the back of the airplane with a fighter stick and fly the boom, and the airplane would come up to you and you would guide it and then extend it hydraulically into the other aircraft. The most proudest I was for my part in the service was for serving my country. The hardest thing about being in the service was right at first, because I got so homesick. And I suppose everybody did, because that was the first time I was ever away from home. And I would recommend that every young person should have to go 2 years in the service to know what it is all about. I think it would really be an eye-opener. It was to me, because I didn't believe anything ever happened like this. And I was glad I went.
Hi, I'm Steve Kaiser. I was living in Fort Eyes, Nebraska when I was drafted into the Army in July of 1968 at the age of 18. I served for 19 months and 29 days of active service. I took basic and AIT in Fort Lewis, Washington, and then went to Fort Benning, Georgia for NCO school. That some guy would come home for Christmas of '68 and didn't go back in time, so we got kicked out of NCO school and stayed in a casual company until we were sent to Vietnam in March of '69. But it talks about, is there one person that really stands out, and that would be our Captain Moon. He served as an enlisted man for 13 years in the service before he went to NCO school, and then became an officer. And his first commanding was in an infantry unit in Vietnam, and that was our Delta Company, 5th Battalion, 12th Infantry of the 199th. And he was a very impressive man. He took care of us guys very well. Around Christmas time of '69, we come in out of the field, and Lieutenant Debo was our artillery FO with us out in the field, and he found out that our Captain Moon's birthday was the 15th of December, so he asked me if he thought I could get the guys in Delta Company to light the sky up for Captain Moon's birthday. So we did. We also were drinking a little bit, so we had a pretty good time. Anyway, we did get that pulled off, and the colonel got pretty upset with our captain because the colonel thought he is the one that put this on, and he didn't know anything about it, so he got his butt chewed pretty royally. We thought that was pretty good on his part, and we've been together. We got back in touch about 15 years ago, I guess it was. One of the guys in 2nd Platoon, when he got out of the service, worked with the FBI, so he had ways of finding people. So when he got retired, he thought he'd get together, see how many guys he could find, and a guy that lives originally from Arkansas, lives in Alaska for the last 40 years, got a hold of me, and it just exploded. And this guy also, we found Captain Moon in Atlanta, Georgia. Everybody thought he was in New Mexico. Anyway, he came to the reunion too down in Arkansas, and we've been trying to get together every 2 years since then. It's quite a healing process for all the things that happened over there. It wasn't all bad, but a lot of it was not good. And it, like I said, it just affects everybody differently. And to meet close friends in service, yep. I just got a call last Sunday from a friend out in New York City that done a documentary on his working with veterans on the mental health side of it. He's really working with the mental health out in New York. It's a lot. They have a lot more than we do around here. We don't have as many fellow veterans, I guess. We're more secluded, or anyway, it's pretty interesting talking to these people. And close friends, I guess we have a friendship that it was developed in a life or death situation, I guess. So it's a different friendship than with the people that we grew up with and we still are friends with today, but that was always just a little bit different. I guess I got to serve this country to protect this country. The job over in Vietnam was to protect them from communism. I had the pleasure of going to R&R in Sydney, Australia at Christmas time of '69, and a friend gave me a camera so I could take some pictures. And so I stopped at a Kodak shop to get some film for the camera, and the lady there, an older lady, she said, "You're from Vietnam, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, how did you know?" Well, I mean, I kind of tell they're the Australians and we were Americans, but she thanked me for serving in Vietnam to try and stop communism, because she said if you wouldn't be up there stopping that, they'd be down in this country in years to come, and we'd lose all of our freedom. And another man that I got to meet there in Australia at Christmas time, or Christmas Day, I wanted to go to church at the largest cathedral in Sydney. So I had rented a suit, and got dressed in the morning, cleaned up, shaved, and got myself all cleaned up, and just went out on the street and started walking, and I met this gentleman, and I just asked him where there was the largest cathedral in Sydney. I'd like to go to Christmas Mass, and he asked me if I was a Catholic, and I said, yes, that's where I want to go. And well, he said he's very proud of it, and he thanked me for being in the service in Vietnam also, and he waved a taxi cab driver down, told him where to take me, paid him to wait for me or to come back in an hour after Mass is over with and bring me back to where my motel or hotel where I was staying. And he paid for it and walked away, just said Merry Christmas. So a lot of good people in the world. And so that's another thing I told my wife when we got married, that someday I wanted to take her to Sydney, Australia, just to show her where I was. And we got that done about 5 years ago, and I got to go back to the cathedral that I went to church in. Pretty impressive. Good time. It was an experience that's, like guys say, wouldn't give $1 million to do it again, but wouldn't take $1 million for not doing it. So I thank you.
My name is Roger Wortman. I live in Hartington, Nebraska, and I was drafted into the Army in 1966. I was 18 years old at the time, and I just figured I wanted to get my draft over with. Other people were going into college, and I was home. Didn't want to go to college, so I decided to go into the Army. November 26th, I was drafted. Went down, took a physical, and if I passed my physical, I was going on into the service. So I left that morning. Dad warned me a little bit, be getting careful, he told me. And I went on in, passed my physical, and the next day I was on a train heading to Fort Bliss, Texas. My job in Vietnam was a forward observer. I went in as a artillery forward observer. But when I got to Vietnam, I was strictly with the infantry. So I spent a lot of time in the field calling in artillery times when it was needed. And that's kind of what I grew up doing. Did I sustain some injuries? Yes, I did. I did get a Purple Heart. And that was a little scary that day when I got that. I got shrapnel put into my arms, and there was kind of bleeding all over the place, but they took me in a helicopter and got me to a hospital, got me treated, and back to the field I was in about 3 weeks. Probably the worst day of being in the service was being away from my family. I know Christmases were tough, and yeah, when you're especially in Vietnam, that Christmas day was a tough day for me. I was thinking of my family very much so, and we just had to get through it. We went on with stuff and we had to get through it. And the best day, it was coming home. I remember distinctly coming home from Vietnam, getting on that plane in Vietnam, and the roar of the people. But when we landed in Washington, that was the most rewarding thing I could have ever gotten. I had some stuff in my pocket, which I kept. I wanted to kind of keep because I was a forward observer. I wanted to keep those things, but when I got on the top of that runway to go down that plane, I couldn't keep those things because I wanted to get out so bad, so I just flung those things back in the plane. It's probably stuff I wasn't supposed to have anyway, but I did. That was the most rewarding day, and coming back to the United States was great. Did I have any good luck charms in the service? Well, the biggest thing I did, I prayed. I prayed every night. Prayed that I would get home and be safe, and I truthfully believe that helped me a lot. I had some close friends which I did communicate with. I still communicate with one of them especially. He's in St. Louis, Missouri, and we talk probably at least once a year back and forth about things, and it is fun to get together and do that. The reunions, I've been to a few reunions, which is great for us to communicate with people that have been there. It's harder to communicate back here with people. I know people want you to say something, but it's just much easier to communicate with people that have been there. My biggest challenges in service was I grew up. I grew up when I came home. I was a complete different person. I know I could have never got what I got in college, what I got from the service. I grew up. It helped me in my business. It helped me in my life, and I'm very grateful for that part of it. I would definitely recommend that everybody should have a chance, should go to the service if possible. If there was a draft now, I would think it would be great for them. I know the hardest thing probably the hardest person that affects when somebody gets drafted, like I did, I think of my mom. What she all did when I was gone, I know she prayed a lot, and I just feel that that's the person that suffered more so than I did. I know my dad, he was in the service also in World War II, and he knew what I was going on. I remember coming home on the plane when we landed. Well, they picked me up in Norfolk. And when I got off the plane, I had my dress greens on, and Dad gave me a hug. Mom gave me a hug, and the next thing I knew, Dad looks at me and he says, "Where did you get that?" And he was pointing to my dress greens up here, and he'd seen that Purple Heart. And I said, "Dad, you know what that is." And Mom didn't know, no idea what he was talking about. But I never did tell them, and I didn't want to worry them at what I went through there to get that, whatever it was. It was no big privilege of getting that, I'll tell you that. After I come home from service, I calfed around for about 2 months. Then I decided it was time to go to work, or Dad told me it was time to go to work. And it was about a year later, right at a year later after I got home, I came home, started a business, which is now plumbing electric service, and I'm still doing it today. 52 years later, and I'm still doing it. I am truthfully glad that I did what I did, and I respect my country with the greatest of utmost. We have the greatest country in the world. Sometimes we don't have the greatest politicians in the world, but we got the greatest country in the world. What makes me the most proud of being in the service was because I did what I did, and it was for my country. And I am proud of my country. For me to stand up and Star Spangled Banner, it almost brings tears to my eyes every time I stand up for that, because I am so proud of being being part of the United States.
I'm Ronald Klug, and I've lived in San Lena when I was drafted. And I was drafted in the Army, and in 1952, at the age of 20. I was in the service for 2 years, and most of the time served in Alaska. I was a half-track driver, and then after I got out of the service, I farmed. And I now live in Hartington.
The Korean War began on June 25, 1950, when some 75,000 soldiers from the North Korean People's Army poured across the 38th parallel, the boundary between the Soviet-backed Democratic People's Republic of Korea to the north and the pro-Western Republic of Korea to the south. This invasion was the first military action of the Cold War. By July, American troops had entered the war on South Korea's behalf. As far as American officials were concerned, it was a war against the forces of international communism itself. After some early back and forth across the 38th parallel, the fighting stalled and casualties mounted with nothing to show for them. Meanwhile, American officials worked anxiously to fashion some sort of armistice with the North Koreans. The alternative, they feared, would be a wider war with Russia and China, or even, as some warned, World War III. Finally, in July 1953, the Korean War came to an end. In all, some 5 million soldiers and civilians lost their lives in what many in the U.S. refer to as the Forgotten War, for the lack of attention it received compared to more well-known conflicts like World War I and II and the Vietnam War. The Korean Peninsula is still divided today. And on closing, I just want to convey our appreciation and thank you for joining us today. Thank you, veterans, and to those who shared their stories and for standing up for Old Glory. We all know freedom isn't free. There's a huge price paid for all our liberties. God bless America, land of our birth, and God bless America, the greatest nation on earth.